Emily, tell me, if I lose my baby, will you and Alexander still get married? Sophia's laughter was maniacal, her venomous gaze seemingly piercing through the phone. Then, she looked up and saw Sophia driving madly towards her. Bang! A loud crash, and Emily felt her world go dark.
There's been an accident. Hello, 911? There's been a car accident. It looks like a pregnant woman is involved.
The incessant shouting made Emily's head buzz. She stumbled out of the car, opened the door, and saw Sophia covered in blood.
My baby, my baby.
At that moment, Emily's face turned ashen. She could never have imagined that Sophia would go to such lengths to stop her wedding with Alexander. Slap. The crisp sound echoed in the hospital corridor. Emily's face bore the clear imprint of a hand, and Alexander's cold gaze bore down on her, his imposing presence making it hard for her to breathe. The light in the VIP operating room was still on, and no one dared to make a sound, all heads bowed.
It wasn't me, I didn't hit her, she drove into me.
Alexander was her fiancé, the man she had loved for 10 years. And the woman lying in the operating room was the one he truly loved.
You're still trying to slander Sophia? She's the one hurt, and you're fine. Do you think I'd believe such lies? So many people saw it happen.
Emily fought to endure the pain in her body, desperately shaking her head. The collision had nearly cost her life. But what hurt more was Alexander's fierce, disappointed gaze and his cutting words.
I already agreed to marry you. What more do you want? Ha!
Alexander, it's not like that. I never thought.
Never thought what? Never thought Sophia wouldn't survive the crash?
His strong arm flung her to the ground, looking down at her.
I'm telling you, if anything happens to Sophia and the baby, I'll hold you responsible.
Just then, the operating room door opened, and a blood-stained doctor rushed out, looking anxious.
Who's the patient's family?
Alexander's face grew even darker. He stepped forward and grabbed the doctor's shoulder, panic-stricken.
I am. How is she?
The baby couldn't be saved. Sir, please sign here.
Hearing this, Alexander's eyes turned icy cold. He took the paper and signed it swiftly, then glared at Emily.
Emily! Are you satisfied now? The baby is gone.
I didn't do it.
Don't think this means you get what you want. I'm telling you, the engagement is off. I won't marry you. And I'll make sure the entire Emily family pays for this child's life.
His menacing gaze made her heart tremble, and intense pain spread through her chest.
No, Alexander, listen to me.
Get out!
Sophia's baby was gone. In Alexander's eyes, she was the culprit, with no way to prove her innocence. No matter how she explained, he wouldn't believe her. But she couldn't leave. She couldn't take the blame for something she didn't do. She couldn't gamble with her family's future and fate. She stayed outside until Sophia woke up. Standing outside the hospital room, she saw the two of them being affectionate, with Alexander feeding Sophia porridge, his expression one of tenderness she had never seen before. Emily stood outside the hospital room, her heart heavy with the burden of false accusations. She watched Alexander tenderly feed Sophia porridge, a tenderness she had never witnessed before.
Alexander, believe me, she did this on purpose. She caused this.
How can you slander me like this? That was my child. How could I?
Alexander's expression darkened, his gaze icy cold as he turned to Emily.
Who let you in? Get out!
Emily's tears flowed uncontrollably, her heart feeling as if it were being torn apart.
Alexander, please, you have to believe me.
Alexander, she dared to harm our child. Will she retaliate against me?
Don't worry, if she dares, I'll personally send her to the depths of despair.
Emily's hope shattered as she listened to their exchange, the cruel reality sinking in. Narrator, tone, sad. She didn't know how long she had walked or where she was going. She was like a soulless ghost. Suddenly, she heard the piercing sound of a car horn and turned her head.
Alexander, tone, angry, get in the car.
Narrator, tone, terrified. The man's icy tone matched his expression, making her shiver. He was here to settle the score.
Alexander, tone, shouting, we have plenty of time. You owe Sophia a life, and I'll take it back slowly.
Narrator, tone, sad. Emily's tears fell instantly at his cold words.
Emily, tone, shouting so in your eyes. I'm just a tool to protect the Emily family.
Narrator, tone, sad. She felt like an emotionless puppet, manipulated by Alexander. It was so pathetic. She had loved him for so many years, but in his heart, she was so worthless.
Daniel, tone, angry you. Bastard.
Alexander, tone, unfriendly bastard. Ask her if she wants to come with this bastard. I tell you, if she dares to say no, tomorrow the Emily family and the Daniel family will disappear without a trace.
Narrator, tone, sad. Emily was mortified, wishing she could disappear. She couldn't implicate Daniel. She knew too well the lengths Alexander would go to for Sophia. Narrator, tone, serious. Before Daniel could respond, Alexander roughly dragged Emily towards Sophia's hospital room.
Emily, tone, shouting, let go of me.
Alexander, tone, mocking, let go so you can go back to that lover of yours?
Narrator, tone, serious. Alexander's eyes were full of mockery. He pulled Emily into the elevator.
Alexander, tone, shouting, you're quite something, huh? Who gave you the guts? Do you know that because of you, Sophia can never have children again?
Narrator, tone, sad. Ignoring Emily's resistance, Alexander dragged her to Sophia's hospital room. Seeing Sophia's face covered in scars, Emily's anger dissipated halfway.
Sophia, tone, shouting, why are you here? Alexander, I don't want to see her. I don't want to see her.
Alexander, tone, comforting Sophia, I'm here. She can't do anything to you.
Narrator, tone, serious. Alexander immediately comforted Sophia, then grabbed Emily's head and forced her to kneel in front of Sophia. It was an unprecedented humiliation, but due to the disparity in strength, Emily couldn't resist and had to kneel in disgrace.
Sophia, tone, angry, it's all because of you. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have lost my child. I wouldn't be unable to have children for the rest of my life.
Narrator, tone, serious. Unable to contain her joy, Emily's face showed a smile, which Alexander caught. He grabbed her hair and glared at her.
Alexander, tone, angry, what are you smiling at? Gloating over this news? Let me tell you, Sophia's inability to have children is all thanks to you. Do you think I'll let you off easily?
Narrator, tone, serious. Emily almost fainted from the pain. But seeing Sophia crying beside her, she forced herself to stand and said,
Emily, tone, serious. This is called karma.
Narrator, tone, serious. As soon as she finished speaking, she received a heavy kick. Emily clutched her abdomen in pain, struggling to speak.
Emily, tone, shouting, kick harder. Make sure I can't have children either. I don't care if I can enter the Alexander family, but if Sophia can't have children, she'll never get into the Alexander family.
Narrator, tone, serious. She was truly desperate. As long as Sophia was in his heart, she couldn't clear her name no matter what she said.
Alexander, tone, mocking your tactics are really clever, huh? Is this your goal? Let me tell you, even if Sophia can't enter the family, I won't let you off easily.
Narrator, tone, serious. He was utterly disappointed in her.
Alexander, tone, serious. If Sophia can't, then you will. From today on, you're responsible for having my and Sophia's child. When the child is born, you can get lost. You owe us this.
Emily, tone, shouting, what did you say? I refuse.
Narrator, tone, serious. Hearing this, Sophia was also stunned. She clenched her fists tightly, staring at Emily, wishing she could tear her apart. But then she thought, it's just a tool for having children, not a real opponent. Emily didn't dare to resist. She couldn't let anything happen to the Emily family, nor could she let anything happen to Daniel. From then on, every night she returned home, she had to endure Alexander's physical torment. Emily stood outside the hospital room, watching Alexander tenderly feed Sophia porridge. A pang of despair hit her. As soon as Alexander entered the room, he saw Emily being forcibly undressed by two men. A surge of anger flared up inside him. No matter how much he disliked her, she was still his wife in name, and he couldn't allow other men to touch her.
What are you doing?
Alexander, sob, it was horrible. Emily did this to me.
Sophia cried out as soon as she saw him, recounting her ordeal and directing all blame towards Emily.
Slut.
Alexander stepped forward and brutally beat Emily until she was nearly unconscious before stopping. Sophia was the woman he loved most, and seeing her in distress pained him deeply. But he felt it unnecessary to subject Emily to the same punishment.
From now on, don't give her any food. If she starves, just cremate her.
This time, Alexander was determined to leave Emily with no place to rest. Seeing Emily beaten to the brink of death, Sophia smiled and then left the bedroom, embraced by Alexander. For 3 consecutive days, Emily didn't eat a single bite. Her body was covered in wounds, and she felt she was on the brink of death. At one point, she even considered giving up, thinking it would be easier to end it all and find relief. Just as she was about to end her suffering, she heard Sophia's voice outside the door.
Emily, are you dead yet? If not, I have some good news for you. Alexander is being tormented by your so-called knight in shining armor. The foreman at the construction site caused quite a scene today. It's going to be big news, thanks to you. If anything happens to Alexander, I'll still get everything I want. I should thank that day. If Alexander didn't feel guilty towards me, he wouldn't have told me all his passwords.
Emily couldn't hear what Sophia said next. She looked out the window, opened it, and, summoning some unknown courage, jumped from the 2nd floor. Fortunately, the flower bed cushioned her fall, and she wasn't seriously hurt. As soon as she stood up, she staggered towards Alexander's new construction site. Because of her disheveled appearance, no one dared to give her a ride, treating her like a plague. With no other choice, Emily had to run all the way to the site. 2 hours later, seeing the crowd gathered at the construction site, Emily grew anxious. If it weren't for her, things wouldn't have escalated to this point. Maybe she shouldn't exist, as she always seemed to bring disaster. At that moment, the foreman was in a heated argument with Alexander. In a fit of rage, he grabbed a knife and lunged at Alexander. No one stepped forward to stop him. Alexander didn't expect the knife to be aimed at him, but suddenly, he was pushed aside by a force. He then heard the sound of the knife piercing flesh.
Ugh.
Emily groaned as pain spread through her body. Already weak, she fainted from the stab wound and collapsed to the ground. Seeing who had saved him, Alexander's eyes were filled with shock.
Call an ambulance!
Outside the operating room, the doctor, who had struggled for an hour, finally mustered the courage to face Alexander, who was pacing the hallway. The operating room door opened, revealing the troubled face of the chief doctor.
What's going on? The patient hasn't come out yet, and you're the attending physician. Why are you out here?
He expected to see her, but saw the chief doctor instead.
Mr. Alexander, you need to prepare yourself mentally. This time, it might not work out. Her body was already weak, and she had just recovered from a previous injury. This time, the damage is severe, I'm afraid.
If anything happens to her, I'll make sure your entire hospital pays the price. Get back in there and continue the surgery.
Alexander's eyes blazed with fury, scaring the doctor back into the operating room. 3 hours later, under immense pressure to avoid dire consequences, all the doctors gave their utmost effort and finally managed to save Emily. They were on the brink of failure.
And the hospital room.
Mr. Alexander, Miss Emily is expecting, but for her safety, we had to prioritize her life. You see.
The nurse looked nervously at Alexander. This time, Emily seemed very important to her. Hearing the word expecting, Alexander was taken aback. He looked at Emily's pale face on the bed, his eyes flickering, then he waved his hand, signaling the nurse to leave.
Emily, have I gone too far?
Alexander's murmured words were overheard by Sophia, who had just arrived. Her pupils contracted in shock.
How could this be? How could Alexander think he had gone too far? It was just a stab wound. This is not good.
Thinking this, Sophia turned and left. She had come to enjoy the spectacle, but instead, she saw this scene. She couldn't let Emily stay here any longer. Her presence was a ticking time bomb for Sophia. Sophia didn't enter the room, she just turned and left the hospital. At this moment, Daniel, who had received the news, also arrived at the hospital and saw Sophia leaving in a hurry. Watching her departure, he picked up his phone and called his assistant.
Follow Sophia, don't let her pull any tricks.
After hanging up, he walked into the hospital. Finding the room, he saw Alexander by Emily's bedside, and Daniel's anger surged. Alexander was caught off guard and knocked to the ground, tasting blood in his mouth. The words he heard were enough to make him lose control.
Alexander, how much more do you want to hurt her before you're satisfied?
Daniel looked at the unconscious Emily on the bed with a heart full of pain and hatred for Alexander. The woman he cherished was worthless to this man.
Get out now!
Alexander's eyes darkened, ready to end Daniel's life at any moment. But Daniel, concerned for Emily, paid him no mind and was soon knocked to the ground by Alexander. The two began to brawl in the room, causing a commotion that drew the attention of the nurses outside. They rushed in to check.
This is a hospital. The patient needs rest. If you want to fight, take it outside.
Despite her fear, the nurse knew these two men were not to be trifled with, but she had to speak up out of professional duty. She couldn't leave. She couldn't take the blame for something she didn't do. She couldn't gamble with her family's future and fate. She stayed outside until Sophia woke up. Emily knew she couldn't leave. She couldn't bear the blame for something she didn't do. She couldn't risk her family's future and fate. So, she stayed outside until Sophia. Emily couldn't. Hearing Sophia's words, the two men became even more excited and immediately launched an attack on Emily. The warehouse door was suddenly kicked open.
Emily!
Daniel saw Emily, tied up and disheveled, and his eyes filled with rage. He rushed forward and fiercely beat the two men, then quickly took off his jacket to cover Emily.
Daniel, you came.
At that moment, Emily was nearly in despair, but seeing Daniel, she felt saved, and her heart overflowed with gratitude.
Daniel, if you move, I'll blow us all up.
Daniel had just picked up Emily when Sophia threatened them with a bomb. Seeing the bomb in her hand, Daniel's eyes tightened, and he stopped in his tracks.
You two, why are you lying on the ground? Get up! Useless!
The two men, hearing Sophia's angry roar, quickly got up. If they upset her even a little, they might all end up in pieces today. They charged at Daniel. Meanwhile, Alexander had received a notification from his subordinates that Sophia had taken Emily to an abandoned warehouse, and it seemed Daniel had also gone there. As soon as Alexander got the news, he rushed to the warehouse with all his might, running countless red lights and causing several traffic accidents along the way. His mind was filled only with thoughts of Emily. A 1-hour drive took Alexander only half an hour. But just as he got out of the car, the warehouse exploded in front of his eyes, leaving the arriving bodyguards stunned.
Emily!
The bodyguards tried to stop Alexander from running into the flames, but he pushed them away. A second explosion occurred, and Alexander, unprepared, was thrown aside.
Boss.
The bodyguards rushed to help Alexander. His legs were severely burned and he couldn't move.
Save them! Save them!
Despite the pain, Alexander was determined to save Emily. She was carrying his child and couldn't be lost. He tried to get up but found he couldn't move and then passed out. When he woke up again, he was in a VIP hospital room. His legs had been crippled by the explosion. As soon as he woke up, he wanted to get up and find Emily, but he couldn't move. He lifted the blanket and saw his legs wrapped in bandages, and his mind went blank.
Someone! Get in here now!
Hearing Alexander's angry voice, a nurse rushed into the room, too scared to breathe.
Mr. Alexander, what can I do for you?
What happened to my legs? And where are my people? Did they do what I asked?
Mr. Alexander, your legs are in bad shape, but the doctor said that with active treatment, you can recover. So, you need to rest well. As for your request, the police are already handling it.
Get out!
The nurse quickly turned and left. Looking at his immobile legs, Alexander couldn't care about anything else. He immediately called someone to say he wanted to inspect the scene personally.
Boss, the police have already investigated.
At that moment, a bodyguard brought 2 officers who had examined the scene into the room.
What did you find?
The officer took out his phone and showed Alexander a photo of a charred female body, whose figure resembled Emily's. Alexander's pupils dilated. No, this couldn't be Emily.
Mr. Alexander, we only found one body at the scene. This is probably the person you're looking for.
They had seen many explosion scenes, but it was rare to find a body still intact after such a blast.
No, keep looking. You can't just assume it's Emily without a clear face. You useless people, keep searching. If you don't find her, you'll pay with your heads.
Alexander's words sent chills down everyone's spines. Even the officers had no way to deal with him. Even if his legs were crippled, he had to find Emily. Emily stood outside the hospital room. She couldn't leave, she couldn't take the blame for something she didn't do, and she couldn't gamble with her family's future. After returning home, Alexander began to investigate the owner of the car.
Emily, if it really is you, you're finished. After disappearing for 4 years, now that I've found you again, I won't let you go.
Soon, his subordinates confirmed that the car belonged to Emily, and now, Emily had become the CEO of a company second only to his own. However, Emily never showed her face, and Daniel managed everything for her behind the scenes. Looking at the information, Alexander frowned.
Emily, you've come this far. Fine, if you don't want to show yourself, I'll find a way to force you out.
After that, Alexander began to actively cooperate with his treatment because he didn't want to be powerless the next time he saw Emily. Everyone was surprised that Alexander, who had given up treatment for 4 years, suddenly started cooperating. It was unbelievable. Because he had been using the best medications, Alexander's surgery was very successful, and he recovered in less than a month. The first thing Alexander did after recovering was to invite everyone in the business world to a ball, spreading the word that it was in his honor. Who would dare not come? After all, Alexander was still the most powerful figure in the city. Offending him would mean no good prospects in the future. His purpose was to lure Emily out. When Daniel saw the invitation, he went to Emily's house to discuss it with her. He knew this was Alexander's deliberate move. Since his leg was healed, it meant he knew Emily was back. At Emily's house, the first person to open the door was not Emily but a 3-year-old child. The child looked a lot like Emily, but the expression in her eyes was strikingly similar to Alexander's.
Uncle Daniel, you're here? You haven't come to see Lily for so long.
Daniel had no resistance to such a cute child, especially one who looked like Emily.
You are here? I just finished making dinner. Join us.
The current Emily was very different from before. Compared to the tormented version of herself under Alexander, she now had a unique charm. Being a mother had given her a rare sense of wisdom.
Sure, I haven't tasted your cooking in a long time. I'll enjoy it today,
Daniel said as he sat down with the mother and daughter.
Uncle Daniel, why don't you just marry my mom? You always leave after coming. Anyway, I don't have a dad.
Daniel blushed. How he wished he could. He had been silently by Emily's side for so many years, hoping she would notice him, so he remained single. Even his sister Grace was expecting a baby, but he was still single. Family gatherings always involved pressure to get married.
That depends on whether your mom is willing, right?
Emily, of course, knew about Daniel's feelings for her over the years. She felt helpless. All she wanted now was to succeed in her career and give her child a good life. As for love, her heart had died 4 years ago, and she could never love someone again.
You came today to discuss something, right?
He was used to her changing the subject.
Here's the invitation.
Daniel took out the invitation from his bag and handed it to Emily. Opening it, Emily was stunned. After hesitating for a while, she said,
He knows I'm back?
Of course, he's the leader of the city. With your current success, he would have found out. But it's okay, if you don't want to go, you can decline.
Daniel said, enjoying Emily's cooking.
He did this to force me out, right? So what if I don't give him face? Emily, don't need to give Alexander face.
Emily said, tearing up the invitation and continuing to eat with her child.
All right, if you're not going, I'll go see how Alexander reacts.
At Alexander's ball, the large garden outside the villa was crowded with people, all there for Alexander, hoping to discuss business or marriage. Everyone believed that Alexander's wife, Emily, was no longer around. Today, Alexander was particularly handsome. It was his first public appearance since his leg healed. As soon as he appeared, all eyes were on him.
Still as handsome as ever. Good thing I didn't get married these years. I have a chance.
Don't fight with me, I've waited so long for this opportunity.
The women discussed how to attract Alexander's attention and marry him, while the business owners talked about resuming cooperation with him. Knowing Alexander's leg was injured, many had withdrawn their investments, thinking he was no longer valuable. But despite being in a wheelchair, Alexander had managed his company well. People thought his good fortune wouldn't last, as many things couldn't be done from a wheelchair. But unexpectedly, Alexander's leg healed. Indeed, the wealthy could solve many problems. Looking at the guests, Alexander searched for Emily but didn't see her. Instead, he saw the last person he wanted to see, Daniel.
Is she not coming?
Alexander asked Daniel, his eyes showing a hint of disappointment.
Whether she comes or not has nothing to do with you, right?
Daniel smiled at Alexander, savoring his wine. Seeing Daniel's smug look, Alexander felt even more frustrated. For so many years, Emily had been with this man. Had they become a couple?
Daniel, let me tell you, don't get too cocky. Emily is still my legal wife. Even if she left, that doesn't change the fact.
Alexander's eyes were filled with anger as he grabbed Daniel's collar.
Emily is with me now. Your words are meaningless. Besides, Emily filed for separation unilaterally. You haven't been married for 4 years.
Alexander was shocked. Emily had separated from him, and he had never received any papers. How could she unilaterally file for separation?
Go ahead, hit me. Tomorrow you'll be on the front page, and the reporters will write whatever they want.
This statement calmed Alexander down. After all, Emily hadn't even been present today. This ball was organized for Emily, and if she didn't show up, what was the point? After that, Alexander only appeared briefly at the ball before disappearing again.
Maybe now he won't trouble me anymore.
But unexpectedly, another invitation to a business banquet arrived shortly after.
This time it's different. The CEO of a crucial project my company has been negotiating will be attending. If I don't go, someone else might snatch the contract.
I know what's troubling you. Don't worry, leave this to me. I never thought Alexander could be so childish.
At the banquet, Daniel used all his skills to secure the contract. After all, the combined allure of Daniel's company and Emily's was certainly greater than Alexander's. This infuriated Alexander, but he had already decided he wouldn't let Emily off this time. The next morning, Emily's house was surrounded by reporters. Just as she was about to take her child to school, a swarm of cameras greeted her.
Is it really Emily? Wow, I never thought she survived and became the CEO of a rising company. Impressive.
Miss Emily, can you explain what really happened during that explosion years ago?
Miss Emily, you've been away from Mr. Zhong for years. Did you know he was injured?
Miss Emily, what does your new venture mean? Rumor has it you divorced Mr. Zhong. Whose child is this?
A barrage of questions bombarded Emily. Watching the scene unfold on TV, Alexander lost his composure when he saw the little girl Emily was protecting.
A child! Could this be my child? Emily had been pregnant back then. Did she give birth to the child?
Overwhelmed with joy at the thought, Alexander quickly drove to Emily's house. Emily, still surrounded and nearly breaking down, didn't know whether to stay or leave. Most importantly, she didn't want her child to witness this.
Get out of the way!
Alexander pushed through the crowd towards Emily and her daughter. Emily looked at Alexander, her eyes filled with surprise, which quickly turned to resentment.
This has to be Alexander's doing.
Indeed, these reporters were called by Alexander. Seeing him speak, they quickly dispersed.
Alexander, after all these years, your methods are still as despicable as ever.
She no longer showed any fear of him. In the past, she had never spoken to him so sarcastically, and Alexander felt a pang in his heart.
Do you know I've been looking for you for 4 years? Where the hell have you been?
Emily's heart remained unmoved. She didn't believe someone like Alexander would ever have a change of heart. He was just upset about losing a toy he could no longer play with and wanted it back. Emily stood resolute outside the hospital room, her heart heavy with determination. She couldn't leave, nor could she take the blame for some. Emily couldn't just leave. She couldn't take the blame for something she didn't do, nor gamble with her family's future and fate. She stood outside the hospital.